They laughed, "She's innocent," until a cowboy rode in. "If she dies today, I die with her." The sun rose slowly over the small town of Red Creek, a quiet place where life seemed to move at the pace of the wind through the dry grass. The wooden buildings stood weathered but proud, their faded paint telling stories of generations who had walked these streets before. Children ran barefoot, their laughter echoing across the dusty main road, and neighbors greeted one another with nods or quick waves. Everything seemed calm, ordinary, almost too ordinary to hint at the storm that was about to arrive. In a modest house at the edge of town lived Clara Thompson, a young woman with hair as dark as night and eyes that reflected honesty and warmth. Clara had grown up in Red Creek, and everyone knew her as a kind soul. She would carry water for the elderly, tend the small garden behind her house, and help the local shopkeeper with deliveries whenever he was busy. Even the children adored her, running to her when they needed a bandage, a kind word, or simply someone to listen. She lived quietly, without complaint, without seeking attention, and in return the town trusted her completely, or so she thought. But life in Red Creek, as peaceful as it appeared, had shadows hidden beneath its simplicity. Gossip traveled faster than the wind, and sometimes fear or jealousy would twist stories into dangerous shapes. One ordinary morning, Clara's life changed forever. It started with a knock at her door, a heavy, urgent knocking that made her heart skip a beat. She opened the door to see two stern-faced men in law enforcement uniforms. They didn't greet her kindly, they didn't smile. They simply announced that she was under arrest. "Under arrest?" Clara's voice shook. "For what? I haven't done anything wrong." The men said nothing but handed her a small piece of paper with the accusations written on it. Clara read the words again and again, each time hoping the meaning would change, but it didn't. The town was buzzing with whispers now. People who had once greeted her warmly in the morning now avoided her gaze, unsure what to believe. Some said, "She's innocent," hoping their words would shield her. Others whispered doubts, the kind of doubt that could slowly twist into suspicion. How could someone so quiet be involved in something like this? Clara was led to the small jailhouse on the edge of town, a structure that had probably seen decades of dust and despair. The bars were cold and the small room smelled of mildew and fear. She sat there alone, her heart pounding, trying to make sense of the injustice that had fallen upon her. Her thoughts were chaotic, jumping from fear to hope and back again. How could this be happening? Why her? She had always been careful, always kind, always honest. Outside, the town reacted in its own way. Red Creek had never experienced anything like this before. The news spread quickly through the streets, and the reactions were mixed. Some people stood outside the jail, shaking their heads in disbelief. They remembered how Clara had helped them, how she had never once asked for anything in return. Others whispered cruelly in corners, questioning how someone so sweet could be capable of wrongdoing. Fear and curiosity mingled, forming a cloud that hung over the town like the approaching storm clouds on the horizon. Inside the jail, Clara's mind refused to settle. She thought about her family, the neighbors who had trusted her, and the children who played in the dusty streets. She thought about the unfairness of it all, and for the first time, she felt the heavy weight of helplessness pressing down on her chest. She tried to remain calm, telling herself that truth had a way of coming out, but even as she clung to that hope, fear crept into every corner of her heart. Night fell over Red Creek, casting long shadows across the town. The quiet that usually brought comfort now felt oppressive. The streets were empty, except for the occasional person walking hurriedly home, glancing nervously toward the small jailhouse at the edge of town. Inside, Clara shivered not from the cold but from the uncertainty. She couldn't sleep, couldn't rest, because she knew that while she waited, the town outside was already forming its judgment. In her small cell, Clara remembered moments from her life, simple acts of kindness that she had performed without thinking. She remembered helping the old widow, Mrs. Granger, carry water to her garden during a summer drought. She remembered teaching young children how to read, how to write, how to believe in themselves. And now she wondered if all of that could protect her from the storm that had suddenly turned on her. The hours passed slowly, each tick of the clock magnifying her fear. Clara could hear muffled voices outside, some in anger, some in worry, some in casual curiosity. The uncertainty was almost unbearable. She realized that in that town, trust could be fragile, shattered by a single accusation. She felt small, invisible, and yet she also felt a strange resolve forming within her. If she was going to survive this, she had to find strength she never knew she had. Meanwhile, the people of Red Creek continued to talk. In the local diner, patrons whispered about Clara's arrest, debating whether she could truly be guilty. "I can't believe it," said one woman, her hands trembling as she sipped her coffee. "Clara wouldn't hurt anyone, she's innocent." Another man shook his head. "But the law doesn't lie. We have to trust the law." The conversations repeated themselves over and over, echoing the same question in different words. Could someone so pure really be accused of something terrible? Back in her cell, Clara heard the distant sound of a horse's hooves on the dirt road. The rhythm was steady, confident, unyielding. Her heart leapt in her chest. She had no idea who it was, but instinct told her it wasn't someone who would bring more trouble. The sound grew closer, faster, until finally it stopped just outside the jailhouse. Clara held her breath, gripping the cold iron bars as she listened. The quiet town of Red Creek was about to see something it had never seen before. Someone who refused to stand by while injustice threatened an innocent life was arriving. And though Clara didn't know it yet, the arrival of that person would change everything. The shadows of doubt that had begun to creep into her life were about to meet the light of courage and determination. As the night deepened and the stars twinkled faintly above, Clara sat in her cell, alone but not entirely hopeless. She thought about the journey ahead, the struggle she might face, and the courage she would need. She didn't know who would come to help her, only that she could not face this alone forever. Somewhere beyond the horizon, someone was riding fast, determined to bring her a chance at survival. The wind whispered through the empty streets, carrying a quiet promise that even in the darkest hour there are those who will not abandon the innocent, who will fight against fear, doubt, and cruelty. Clara closed her eyes for a brief moment, clinging to that thought. Her story was just beginning, and though she didn't know what the next day would bring, she knew she would not give up without a fight. And so, in the quiet, tense hours of that night, Clara waited. She waited for justice, for truth, and for the arrival of someone who would ride in with courage in their heart and fire in their eyes, ready to stand by her when everyone else hesitated. Little did she know, that person was already on their way, and the winds of Red Creek were about to carry a story that would be remembered for years to come. The sound of horse hooves grew louder, echoing through the quiet streets of Red Creek. Each beat was steady, strong, and purposeful. The townspeople peeked from behind curtains or doors, curiosity mixed with fear, wondering who could be riding at such speed in the dead of night. Some said it was another messenger, some whispered it might be trouble. But no one could guess the truth, that a man named Luke Carson was riding toward the small jailhouse with a heart full of courage and a mind set on justice. Luke was a cowboy known throughout the county, not for violence, but for a sense of fairness that could not be shaken. He had grown up on a ranch outside Red Creek, learning to ride horses, mend fences, and read the land in ways only those who lived closely with it could understand. He was tall, with broad shoulders, sun-weathered skin, and eyes that seemed to see everything, even the smallest hint of injustice. But more than his strength or skill, it was his loyalty that defined him. Once he committed to something or someone, he never wavered. When Luke heard about Clara's arrest, something inside him stirred. He had known her since they were children, had watched her grow from a shy little girl into a compassionate young woman who cared deeply for everyone around her. The thought that she could be in danger, accused of something she did not do, filled him with a mix of anger and determination. He could not stand by while an innocent life hung in the balance. At sunrise, before most people had even stirred, Luke saddled his horse. He checked the leather straps, tightened the cinch, and mounted with practiced ease. "If she dies today," he muttered under his breath, "I die with her." The words were not bravado, they were a promise made not just to Clara but to the principle of truth itself. He knew the town might doubt him, might even try to stop him, but he did not care. Nothing could shake his resolve. The ride into Red Creek was long and dusty. Luke urged his horse forward, the animal's hooves throwing dirt into the early morning light. He thought of the town, the jailhouse, and most of all Clara. He imagined her fear, the cold iron bars against her skin, the uncertainty in her heart. He clenched his jaw and leaned forward, pushing himself and his horse to move faster. Every mile that passed brought him closer to her, closer to the chance to protect her when everyone else hesitated. Meanwhile, Clara sat in her small cell, listening. She had been awake most of the night, turning over every memory, every word, every moment that might help her make sense of the nightmare she was living. She heard the faint sound of hooves, the rhythm cutting through the silence like a promise. At first she thought it was a dream, a wish manifesting itself in sound. But as the rhythm grew clearer, stronger, she realized that someone was coming, someone who might be her salvation. Her heart leapt with hope, mingled with fear. Could it really be him? Could someone actually come to help her? Luke arrived at the edge of town as the first rays of sun began to warm the streets. He slowed his horse, scanning the town, noting the curious faces peeking from windows and doorways. Whispers followed him, questions he ignored. "Who is he?" someone asked. "What does he want?" But Luke's focus was entirely on the jailhouse, a small wooden building with bars that trapped Clara inside. He dismounted, slinging the reins over his arm, and approached with quiet confidence. The sheriff was already there, leaning against the door, arms crossed. His face was hard, eyes wary. "What do you want, Carson?" he asked, his voice carrying authority. "This woman is under arrest. She stays until the matter is settled." Luke squared his shoulders, meeting the sheriff's gaze without fear. "I know she is innocent," he said simply. "I've known her all her life. I will take responsibility if anything happens. Let her out or I will not leave without her." His voice was calm but carried the weight of determination, the kind that made even the toughest men pause. The sheriff hesitated, uncertain. He had followed the rules all his life, never challenging authority, never bending the law. But something about Luke's presence, his unwavering confidence, made him pause. The townsfolk had begun to gather, curiosity and tension filling the air. They whispered among themselves, unsure what to make of the situation. Some looked at Luke with admiration, others with doubt. But no one could deny the sense of purpose radiating from him. Inside the cell, Clara felt a strange sensation. It was hope, fragile but real. She pressed herself against the bars, trying to see through the small window in the door. Then she saw him, Luke, standing tall, speaking with authority, challenging the town's assumptions and refusing to let fear dictate the outcome. For the first time since she had been locked away, she felt that she was not alone. Luke spoke to the sheriff again, this time with more urgency. "You may follow the law, but the law can be wrong. She's innocent and you know it. I will not let her be harmed while I am here." His words were firm, but he did not shout. The calm strength in his tone carried more power than anger ever could. A crowd began to form, drawn by the tension, the drama unfolding in front of them. They whispered, some in support, others in doubt. Mothers clutched their children, men shifted uneasily, and the air seemed charged, waiting for something to break the stillness. Clara watched from her cell, hope mingling with fear. Could this man really save her? Could justice truly arrive in the form of a lone cowboy? Luke knew he had to act quickly. He could not wait for everyone in town to decide what was right. He had to rely on his own instincts, his own knowledge of Clara, and the evidence he had begun to gather even before he arrived. He spoke to the sheriff one last time, his voice steady, unwavering. "I will prove her innocence. Let her come with me and you will see the truth. Refuse, and I will not leave until she is safe." The sheriff glanced around at the growing crowd, at the faces of people who had once trusted Clara, and perhaps at the silent question in the town itself. Could one man's courage be enough to change everything? He hesitated, then slowly nodded, stepping aside. Luke didn't waste a moment. He opened the cell door and extended his hand to Clara. Tears filled her eyes as she took his hand, the first human touch she had felt in hours that brought comfort rather than fear. Luke guided her out of the cell, keeping her close, protective, and calm. The townsfolk watched in stunned silence as the two of them emerged together, a symbol of courage and loyalty in the face of fear and doubt. But the danger was far from over. Luke knew that proving Clara's innocence would not be easy. The real culprit was still hidden, and there were those who would do anything to see her punished. Yet he did not falter. Each step he took with Clara was measured, purposeful. Every movement was calculated to protect her, to shield her from harm, and to move closer to the truth. As they made their way through the town, people whispered, some in awe, others in disbelief. "He's really standing up for her," one woman said quietly. "No one else would have dared." "But what if he's wrong?" a man murmured. The tension in the air was almost tangible, but Luke ignored it. His focus was entirely on Clara, on keeping her safe, and on finding the evidence that would clear her name. They stopped at a small, quiet alley where Luke had spotted the first clue, a ledger hidden under a loose floorboard in a nearby building. It was small, unassuming, but inside it lay the proof they needed. Names, transactions, evidence of the crime Clara had been accused of, but pointing to someone else entirely. Luke's heart pounded with relief and anticipation. Clara looked at him, hope shining in her eyes for the first time in what felt like forever. "This is it," Luke said softly. "This proves your innocence. We just need to make sure everyone sees it." Clara nodded, gripping his arm, feeling both fear and courage mingling inside her. The path ahead was dangerous, yes, but for the first time she felt a spark of hope that justice might prevail. Luke mounted his horse again, helping Clara up behind him. Together, they rode toward the place where the truth could be revealed, where lies could be exposed, and where the town would see that one innocent woman had been accused unjustly. Each stride of the horse was a beat of determination, a rhythm of courage, a signal that change was coming. Red Creek had never seen anything like this. A quiet, dusty town with its own rules and whispers was about to witness the arrival of justice in the form of a cowboy willing to risk everything for one innocent woman. And as the sun climbed higher in the sky, the first rays of light illuminated the courage of one man and the hope of one woman, both determined to see truth triumph over fear. The journey had just begun, and though danger waited around every corner, Luke and Clara were ready to face it together. In that moment, the town of Red Creek realized that courage could come in the form of a single rider, arriving just in time to challenge fear, doubt, and injustice. And that sometimes, the only way to protect the innocent was to ride fast, think clearly, and refuse to back. Down, the morning sun had fully risen over Red Creek, casting long shadows on the wooden buildings and dusty streets. Clara clung to Luke's back as they rode swiftly, the wind whipping her hair across her face. She tried to steady her breathing, though her heart pounded with a mix of fear and hope. The small town behind them was already buzzing with whispers, rumors spreading faster than she could imagine, but ahead lay the path to clearing her name. Luke's eyes were fixed on the road ahead. His mind was calm, though every sense was alert. He had seen fear and danger before, but this was different. This was about someone he cared for deeply, someone innocent caught in a web of lies. He had no time to waste. Every moment counted, because if the wrong person's story reached the authorities first, Clara could lose everything she had, even her life. They turned a corner and slowed briefly near the old general store. Luke pointed to a small, hidden alley beside it. "This way," he whispered. "We need to find the ledger before anyone else does. It's the only proof that will clear your name." Clara nodded, gripping his arm tightly. She felt a mix of hope and nervousness, knowing that finding the ledger was only the first step. But with Luke by her side, she felt stronger than she had in hours, even days. The alley was narrow, lined with crates and barrels, some tipped over, some stacked high. Luke dismounted, motioning for Clara to stay close behind him. His eyes scanned every corner, every shadow, looking for the small wooden floorboard he had spotted from the window of the general store the night before. The townsfolk might never have noticed it, hidden as it was beneath a loose board that creaked when pressure was applied. Luke pried the board up carefully, revealing the worn ledger beneath. Clara gasped softly. "Is this it?" she asked. Luke nodded. "Yes. Every name, every transaction, every detail, proof that the crime you were accused of points to someone else entirely. We just need to show it to the right people." Clara reached out to touch the ledger, her hands trembling. For so long, she had felt powerless, trapped, and alone. Now, holding the evidence that could save her, she felt the weight of hope settling into her chest. But she also understood that hope alone wasn't enough. They still had to act carefully. One wrong move, one person suspecting their plan, and everything could fall apart. They mounted their horses again and rode toward the sheriff's office. The streets were already waking up, merchants opening their shops, children running to fetch water, and neighbors gossiping about the events that had begun before sunrise. Clara felt the eyes of the town on them as they passed. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with doubt. She could feel their judgment pressing down, as though she had to prove herself not just to the law, but to every single person who had whispered about her in doubt. Luke's mind raced as he considered their options. They couldn't simply walk into the sheriff's office and demand that everyone believe them. The evidence needed to be presented carefully, logically, and publicly. He knew some townsfolk had already formed their own conclusions, some hoping for her release, others waiting for failure. To convince them all, Luke needed more than the ledger. He needed witnesses, undeniable proof, and courage. And most of all, he needed to remain calm and composed, because if he showed fear, the town would see it, and the plan could crumble. When they reached the sheriff's office, the building looked just as imposing as it had the night before. The sheriff himself was standing at the doorway, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "Back so soon?" he asked. His tone was guarded, skeptical. "What proof do you have now?" Luke dismounted, holding the ledger carefully. "This," he said simply. "This ledger contains every detail of the crime you accused Clara of, but the names here show who is truly responsible." The sheriff raised an eyebrow, glancing at the growing crowd behind Luke and Clara. People had begun to gather, curious about what was happening, sensing the tension in the air. Merchants stepped out of their shops, neighbors paused in the street, and even children stopped playing, their small faces full of wide-eyed wonder. Everyone seemed to understand that something important was unfolding. Luke flipped open the ledger and began pointing to the entries. "Here, look at this transaction. Here, notice the dates. The real person responsible for this crime is clearly listed." Clara had nothing to do with it. "She's innocent." Some in the crowd murmured in surprise. "Could it be true?" whispered a woman. "All this time we believed the wrong story." Another man shook his head, staring at the ledger. "Then we judged her unfairly," he admitted aloud. Clara watched in awe, her heart swelling. Luke's calm, clear explanation was cutting through the doubt that had hung over her like a shadow. But even as relief began to wash over her, she knew that proving innocence to a skeptical town would not be easy. Some people could not easily admit that they were wrong. Some would cling to fear and gossip, regardless of the truth. Luke seemed to sense her concern. "We're not done yet," he said quietly, leaning toward her. "We have to confront the person who tried to frame you. Only then will everyone truly understand the truth." Clara nodded, feeling both nervous and determined. She had spent hours imagining what it would be like to finally clear her name, but the reality was more terrifying than she had expected. Yet with Luke guiding her, she felt a courage she didn't know she had. She realized that surviving this ordeal would not just be about proving innocence. It would be about standing up for herself, refusing to let fear dominate her life. Luke led Clara through the back streets, avoiding the main roads where curious townsfolk might interfere. They approached an old, abandoned barn at the edge of town. This was where Luke believed the person responsible for framing Clara had hidden, thinking no one would find them. The barn was dark, its wooden walls creaking in the morning wind. Inside, shadows danced across the floor, making it difficult to see clearly. Luke signaled for Clara to stay behind him as he stepped forward, the ledger clutched firmly in his hand. Suddenly, a figure appeared from the shadows, startled by their presence. Luke spoke first, his voice calm but commanding. "We know what you did. The ledger proves it. You tried to ruin an innocent woman's life. But the truth is here now, and there's no hiding from it." The person froze, realizing the extent of the evidence against them. Fear replaced their arrogance and their confidence crumbled. Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "I didn't do this. You know it. Everyone will know it now." Luke handed the ledger to the sheriff, who had followed them cautiously. The entries in the book left no room for doubt. Witnesses from the town began to arrive, called by Luke beforehand to testify about their knowledge of the person responsible. Slowly, the truth emerged. Every lie that had been told to cover the real culprit's actions was exposed. The town could no longer ignore it. As the morning wore on, the townsfolk began to shift. Those who had doubted Clara now offered apologies, some quietly, some publicly. People who had feared speaking up found courage in the evidence and in Luke's unwavering determination. Clara felt a mix of relief, exhaustion, and gratitude. She had survived the darkest hours of her life, but more than that, she had learned the power of loyalty and courage, the strength found in standing for truth even when everyone else hesitated. Luke looked at her and smiled, a quiet, reassuring gesture. "It's not over yet," he said gently. "We still need the sheriff to clear your name officially, and we need to make sure this person faces justice. But you're safe now." Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face. She had never felt so grateful, so alive, and so ready to face the world. The town of Red Creek, once ready to believe the worst, was now witnessing a lesson in courage, justice, and the importance of standing for what is right. And Clara, once powerless and afraid, was learning to find her own strength, her own voice, with Luke by her side. As the sun climbed higher, bathing the town in golden light, Clara realized that life would never be the same. She had been tested, threatened, and nearly lost, but the bond she shared with Luke and the truth that had been revealed would stay with her forever. And while challenges still lay ahead, she knew that together, they could face anything, fight any injustice, and ensure that no innocent person would ever be silenced again. The tension in Red Creek had reached its peak. The streets were quieter than usual, the townspeople watching from windows, doorways, and alleys. Everyone seemed to feel that something important was about to happen. Rumors had spread like wildfire, but now the truth was slowly coming to light. Clara had the ledger in her hands, and Luke stood beside her, firm, unwavering, ready to confront the person who had tried to ruin her life. Luke led Clara to the center of the town, where the culprit had been hiding their actions in secret. The man responsible, a shady figure who had long manipulated small crimes for personal gain, had never expected someone to challenge him so directly. His smug confidence had carried him for months, until now. Luke's arrival, his calm determination, and the clear evidence in the ledger made the man hesitate for the first time in his life. Fear replaced arrogance. Luke called out clearly, his voice ringing across the street. "You tried to ruin an innocent woman's life. Your lies, your schemes, everything is exposed. The town has a right to know the truth." The man stepped forward reluctantly, his eyes darting between the growing crowd and the ledger in Luke's hand. "You don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, his usual composure slipping. I didn't do anything." Luke didn't flinch. "The ledger proves it. Every entry, every transaction, every detail points to your guilt. Clara had nothing to do with it. She is innocent, and the town will see that." Clara felt her heart pounding in her chest. The confrontation she had imagined for days was finally here. She stood tall, though her hands trembled slightly, and looked the man straight in the eye. "I did not commit this crime," she said firmly. "You lied to everyone to cover your own mistakes, but now the truth is here, and I will not let you hurt anyone else like this again." The townspeople had begun to gather in the street, murmuring among themselves. They were stunned, watching as the story they had believed for so long was being challenged before their eyes. Some had doubted Clara, some had feared speaking up, but now, with clear evidence in hand and Luke standing strong beside her, their doubts began to fade. Whispers of admiration for Luke and Clara spread through the crowd. He really stood up for her. She was telling the truth all along. Luke stepped closer to the culprit, keeping a careful distance, his eyes steady. "It's over. The town knows the truth. There's no escaping this now. You will face the consequences for your actions." The man tried to argue, but the evidence was undeniable. Luke handed the ledger to the sheriff, who had followed cautiously behind them. The sheriff examined the pages, his eyebrows rising as he read through the details. Witnesses who had been called earlier confirmed the ledger's contents. The town had finally seen what Luke had known from the start. Clara was innocent, and the man responsible had tried to manipulate everyone for personal gain. Slowly, the sheriff raised his head. This proves her innocence," he said, his voice heavy with realization. "And it proves your guilt." He motioned to deputies to ensure the man could not escape. The culprit's face fell, and for the first time he realized that no lies could protect him now. Clara felt a surge of relief, though exhaustion weighed on her. The fear that had gripped her heart for days began to lift. She looked at Luke, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I couldn't have faced this without you." Luke smiled softly. "You don't have to thank me yet," he said gently. "We still need to make sure the town sees this, understands this, and knows the truth. That's just as important as proving your innocence." The sheriff called the townspeople together in the main square. Luke and Clara stood before them, holding the ledger for everyone to see. The crowd fell silent, eager to hear the truth directly. Luke spoke clearly, recounting the events, pointing to the evidence, and explaining how Clara had been falsely accused. As he spoke, the townspeople began to understand the gravity of what had happened. They realized how easily rumors, fear, and assumptions had threatened an innocent life. Faces that had once doubted Clara softened, regret and relief mingling in their expressions. "We judged too quickly," said one man quietly. "We were wrong." Clara listened, her emotions swirling. Relief, gratitude, and a quiet sense of justice filled her. She realized that the town had been given the chance to correct its mistakes, and that standing up for the truth could change everything. Luke remained at her side, a steady presence, reminding her that she was not alone, that courage and loyalty could overcome fear and doubt. The man responsible was led away by deputies, his attempts to escape justice ending in failure. The crowd watched in silence, knowing that the chapter of deceit and fear had finally ended. Clara's innocence had been proven, not just by documents, but by the courage of one man willing to ride into the heart of danger to protect her. Luke turned to Clara as the crowd began to disperse, speaking softly so only she could hear. "You are safe now," he said. "The town knows the truth. No one can take that away from you." Clara nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I feel free," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "After all that fear, all that doubt, I finally feel free." The townspeople began to approach, offering apologies, words of encouragement, and expressions of regret for doubting her. Clara accepted them graciously, her heart open despite everything she had endured. She realized that forgiveness was not just for the townspeople, but also for herself. She had survived, she had fought, and she had emerged stronger than ever before. Luke watched the interactions quietly, a sense of satisfaction settling over him. His promise had been fulfilled. He had ridden into the town when no one else would, stood by Clara's side, and ensured that justice prevailed. But more than that, he had shown the town that courage, loyalty, and truth were more powerful than fear and gossip. As the day wore on, the town slowly returned to a sense of normalcy. Clara returned to her home, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in days. Luke stayed nearby, knowing that her journey was not over, that rebuilding trust and life after such an ordeal would take time. Yet, the foundation had been laid. Clara had survived, her name had been cleared, and the town had learned a valuable lesson in courage and justice. That evening, as the sun set over Red Creek, casting golden light across the town, Clara stood outside her home, looking at the horizon. The fear and uncertainty of the past days seemed like a distant memory. She felt hope, resilience, and gratitude. She had faced the darkest hours of her life and emerged stronger. And though challenges might come again, she knew she was not alone. Luke's presence reminded her of that truth, a steady reassurance that even in the face of danger, loyalty and courage could triumph. The town, too, had changed. Red Creek had learned the power of standing for truth, the danger of rushing to judgment, and the strength that comes from protecting the innocent. The story of Clara and Luke would be remembered for years to come, a tale of courage, justice, and unwavering loyalty. As night fell, Clara and Luke sat quietly outside, the stars beginning to twinkle in the clear sky. There were no words needed. The ordeal had ended, but the bond formed through fear, courage, and determination would last a lifetime. They had faced uncertainty, danger, and doubt, and together they had triumphed. Clara took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening air fill her lungs. She knew that she had been tested, but she had survived. She had learned to trust, to hope, and to stand tall in the face of fear. And as she looked at Luke, she realized that sometimes the bravest acts are not just those that fight enemies, but those that protect what is innocent, what is pure, and what is worth standing for. Luke rested a hand gently on hers. "You're safe," he said again, softly but firmly, "and we'll make sure the town remembers what really happened. They'll know the truth, and they'll know that courage matters." Clara smiled, a sense of calm and joy spreading through her. She had survived, she had been protected, and she had learned the power of truth, loyalty, and courage. And though the days ahead would bring their own challenges, she knew that she would face them with strength, knowing that fear and doubt could be overcome, and that sometimes one person's bravery could change everything. The stars shone above Red Creek that night, a quiet testament to the victory of truth and courage. Clara and Luke watched them, sitting side by side, knowing that the darkness had passed, and that in the light, justice and loyalty would always endure. After the confrontation in Red Creek and the revelation of the truth, life in the small town slowly began to return to normal. The tension that had gripped the streets for days was replaced with cautious relief. Clara walked through the town square, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face and noticing how different everything felt. People greeted her with smiles, some shyly, others openly, but all with a new sense of respect. The whispers of doubt and fear had been replaced with acknowledgement of her innocence and admiration for her courage. Clara returned to her modest home, stepping through the door with a deep sense of relief. The house, which had once felt quiet and confining during her imprisonment, now seemed like a safe haven. She moved slowly, letting the sense of freedom sink in. For days she had felt trapped not just by the walls of the jail but by the weight of fear and suspicion. Now she could breathe again. The air felt lighter, the colors brighter, and even the smallest sounds, birds singing, leaves rustling, seemed to carry a sense of hope. Luke stood by her side, leaning casually against the fence outside her home. His presence had been constant throughout the ordeal, a silent reassurance that she was not alone. He had risked everything to protect her, challenging fear, law, and town gossip alike. Clara glanced at him, gratitude shining in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. I couldn't have faced any of this without you." Luke smiled, a quiet, humble smile. "You don't need to thank me," he replied. "I did what anyone would do if someone they cared about was in danger. But you were brave too. You stood your ground when it mattered most." His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that made Clara's heart swell. She realized that courage was not just about physical strength or daring actions. It was about facing fear, speaking truth, and trusting others when it mattered most. The town had learned a valuable lesson as well. People who had been quick to judge or whisper rumors now understood the power of truth and loyalty. Many approached Clara with apologies, some heartfelt, others awkward but sincere. "We should have believed you from the start," said Mrs. Granger, the elderly neighbor Clara had helped for years. "We let doubt cloud our hearts, and we are sorry." Clara nodded, accepting the apologies with grace. She understood that people made mistakes, and that forgiveness was an essential part of moving forward. As the days passed, life in Red Creek slowly found its rhythm again. Clara returned to her daily routines, helping neighbors, tending her small garden, and caring for children in the town. But now she moved with a new confidence. She no longer felt the fear that had weighed her down. Instead, she carried a sense of purpose and resilience, knowing that she had faced injustice and survived. Every step she took, every kind act she performed, was now infused with a quiet strength that came from experience and survival. Luke remained close, often visiting Clara or riding alongside her when she ventured beyond her home. Their bond had grown deeper during the ordeal, formed through shared fear, trust, and courage. They had faced danger together, stood against uncertainty, and emerged stronger. The townspeople noticed the closeness between them, whispers of admiration and approval spreading quietly. But for Clara and Luke, the connection was simple and profound. They had been each other's anchor in a storm that had threatened to destroy everything. One afternoon, as they walked through the town, Clara noticed how the small community had changed. The sheriff, once rigid and skeptical, now carried himself with a newfound understanding of justice and caution. Merchants and neighbors seemed more willing to listen, to question, and to support one another. The events of the past weeks had reminded everyone of the fragility of trust, the danger of assumptions, and the importance of standing for truth, even when it is uncomfortable or difficult. Clara and Luke paused at the edge of the town, looking out over the wide, open plains. The wind carried the scent of fresh grass and earth, and the sky stretched endlessly above them, painted in soft shades of blue and gold. Clara felt a sense of peace she had not known for days. The world seemed vast and full of possibilities, and for the first time in a long time she could imagine a future unburdened by fear. Luke turned to her, his expression gentle but serious. "What happened here? It wasn't just about proving your innocence," he said. "It was about showing everyone that courage and truth matter, that even when the world seems to doubt you, standing firm in what is right can change everything." Clara nodded slowly, taking in his words. "I've learned that," she said quietly. I've learned that fear can be overwhelming, but it doesn't have to control us. And I've learned that having someone by your side makes all the difference. The town slowly healed as well. Life returned to a steady rhythm, with people going about their daily tasks, but the memory of what had happened lingered. Stories of Clara's innocence, Luke's bravery, and the courage it took to confront lies spread beyond Red Creek, reaching nearby towns. They became an example, a reminder that truth and justice were worth fighting for, even when the odds seemed impossible. Clara herself became a quiet symbol of resilience. Children who had once played around her now listened carefully to her stories, learning lessons about honesty, courage, and the importance of standing for what is right. Neighbors sought her advice, and she guided them with the wisdom she had gained from her own ordeal. Though she remained humble, her presence commanded respect. People knew she had faced fear and injustice and had emerged not just unbroken but stronger. Luke continued to support her, though he never sought recognition or praise. He had done what he believed was right, and that was enough for him. But in his quiet way, he showed Clara that loyalty and courage were not only about dramatic actions. They were about being present, standing firm, and never abandoning someone in need. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day, a quiet companionship built on trust, shared experiences, and mutual respect. Evenings in Red Creek took on a new sense of calm. Clara often walked through the town with Luke, enjoying the gentle breeze, the sound of laughter from children playing, and the sight of neighbors chatting and helping one another. The town had survived the storm of doubt and fear, and in many ways it had emerged wiser and more compassionate. Clara knew that the events of the past weeks had changed everyone, and that the lessons learned would endure for years to come. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Clara and Luke stood outside her home. The air was quiet, filled only with the sound of wind and distant voices. Clara felt a sense of completion, of a chapter ending and another beginning. "It's strange," she said softly, "how quickly everything can change. One moment fear and doubt can surround you, and the next everything is different." Luke nodded, his hand brushing lightly against hers. "Life is like that," he said, "but what matters is how we respond. You faced fear, you stood for truth, and together we made sure justice prevailed." Clara smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her. "I never thought I could be this strong," she admitted. "But now I know strength comes from facing fear, from having people who believe in you, and from refusing to give up." The stars began to appear in the sky, one by one, shining brightly over Red Creek. Clara and Luke stood side by side, gazing at the vast expanse above them. It was a quiet, peaceful moment, one that carried the weight of everything they had endured. The town below was safe, justice had been served, and the bond between them was unshakable. Clara felt a sense of gratitude that went beyond words. She had survived fear, overcome doubt, and discovered courage within herself she never knew existed. She had learned the value of loyalty, the power of truth, and the importance of standing for what is right. And she had learned that even in the darkest moments, hope could be found in people, in truth, and in the unwavering commitment of someone willing to ride in when everyone else hesitated. Luke squeezed her hand gently. "No matter what happens next, you are not alone," he said. "And the town, they will remember what happened here. They will remember courage, loyalty, and truth." Clara nodded, feeling the final pieces of fear fall away. She had been tested, threatened, and judged, yet she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. The world seemed full of possibility once more. She realized that life would continue to bring challenges, but she now understood that courage, truth, and loyalty could overcome even the darkest obstacles. As night fully settled over Red Creek, the town quiet and peaceful, Clara and Luke remained outside her home. They shared a comfortable silence, a quiet acknowledgement of everything they had endured together. The The stars above seemed to shine just a little brighter, reflecting the triumph of truth and the victory of courage over fear. Clara took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill her lungs. She had survived, she had been protected, and she had learned the true value of standing firm in the face of injustice. And though life would continue, bringing new challenges and surprises, she knew that she would face them with strength, hope, and the knowledge that she was never truly alone. Red Creek, once a town clouded with fear and doubt, had been transformed. Its people had witnessed courage, honesty, and the power of standing for what is right. And Clara, the young woman who had faced the darkest moments of her life, now stood free, confident, and ready to embrace the future. Luke stayed by her side, the silent promise of loyalty and protection never fading. Together, they had faced fear, confronted injustice, and emerged victorious. And as the stars twinkled above them, they both knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, courage, truth, and loyalty would always light the way.